So, the other day, I was watching American Graffiti. It's one of my favorites. And actually, I haven't seen the movie many times. Actually, I have it right here because I bought it on Blu-ray. I was like, I should check it out. So I checked it out again because I've seen it previously. And I've kind of noticed something a lot. Whenever I hear about American Graffiti, it's, oh yeah, it's the movie that came before Star Wars. Because if you don't know, bit of a history lesson. George Lucas was trying to get Star Wars made. And many people were like, I don't know, can you do it? You're a small guy, no one knows your name. During this, he's like, you know, I'll make a smaller film. He made American Graffiti. And I feel like that's all that this movie is known for, is the movie that introduced us to George Lucas and allowed Star Wars to happen. But in my opinion, it is so much more than that. I'm gonna do this hopefully short video where I kind of dive into this movie that I feel like is very under talked about. So I want to start off by saying this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Honestly, top 4. I love it so much. Characters are great and all, but let's get that in a bit. I'm gonna start with a super unpopular opinion about this movie. It's the best movie George Lucas directed. Obviously, that doesn't include things such as Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Empire Strikes Back. Because those were, while partially written by George Lucas, were directed by other people. But this does include A New Hope. Attack me if you will, this movie is better than A New Hope, and I'll stand to that point until my head's in a guillotine. Okay. So that's my very popular opinion. And one of the things that's so interesting about this movie is I'm a huge fan of those movies that are a bit more smartly made, you know, takes a bit of brain to fully comprehend. But this movie is just pure fun. The setting, 1962. It's great. Characters are charismatic. The plot, it's kind of loosey-goosey, but it works for the style it was going for. And the soundtrack is top-notch. So let's start with the setting. California, 1962. It's just, you know what? Sometimes all I want is a small town in the early 60s. And it works. Let's talk about these characters a bit. They're all so unique and very grounded, honestly. I think that just adds to the fun. You see a character, you can recognize their face, they all have pretty good designs, and they're all fun. While there is obviously female characters, as there is in almost every movie, this is a kind of more movie about the men of the story, and the females are kind of just there to spice it up and start conflict, with the exception of, I'm having a brain fart of what her name is. I think it's Lori. I know this is one of my favorites, but like I said, I haven't seen it much, and it's already one of my favorites. You should check it out, definitely. She's kind of a bit more upfront with one of the main characters, who's a dude. I like to kind of view it in a similar fashion to Pulp Fiction, where you have all these different stories, and then they wrap up together at the end. Except these stories were being told to them in chronological order, and they're all happening simultaneously, so we're cutting from one to the other, not sticking with one. Okay, let's jump back a bit, jump forward a bit, let's say Pulp Fiction. And I think it just works so well for this type of movie. Okay, the plot, super simple. Harrison Ford. He's Harrison Ford before Han Solo. So that's pretty interesting. One of the main characters, he's like, I want to race this guy because he's super fast. And also, I probably should have touched on this. This movie, so much of it is just cruising, but I'll get a bit more into that a bit later. So he's like, hey, we gotta race. And so we see him kind of popping in and out of everyone's stories as he says, let's race. So he's like, hey, I need this. We're gonna race. I want to prove to you that I'm better. So that's one of the conflicts from one of the characters. Kind of more Harrison Ford, and he's very, honestly, he's kind of in it every once in a while throughout the story until the very end when he is there during that conclusion where the stories cross. Then we have another story which is a bit more romance oriented, where you have a dude who's gonna go off to college in the next morning, and his girlfriend, they're like, what are we gonna do? And the dude suggests, what if we see other people, so when we come back for Christmas we realize how we love each other. This causes them a fight, and throughout the story we kind of see their fight being very on and off. It's kind of curious of where it's gonna end, and it has a satisfying ending along with the Harrison Ford race scene at the end. Now the guy Harrison Ford wants to race, he has a kind of a weird story. He's just cruising because he doesn't fully know about the race yet. He's joking with a bunch of girls in another car saying, hey, yeah, anyone wants to go cruising with me? And then, you know, one girl that we can't exactly see yet says, yeah, I'll go. And they're like, okay, cool, it's Judy's sister. And then one of the just amazing reversal happens. And it's this 12-year-old girl. And and the way I view her is this, there was a TikTok girl in the 60s, and it works, and their dynamic is really fun, and you kind of get a weird friendship between the two as the story develops. It's kind of the least obvious plot. It's very just these characters slowly bond without the proper conclusion, because it's more, their conclusion is more Harrison Ford's character's conclusion. And it just works. There's also, you know, this one guy who has glasses, who's trying to impress this really hot girl. And that has many fun twists and turns. There's also a guy trying to find a girl in a T-Bird and gets trouble with some gang activity. And that's really fun and convincing and enjoyable. Like I said, the characters are great. The plot is very simple. And like I said, none of these really tie into each other at the very end, which I don't want to spoil because this is more a video trying to get people to watch this very untalked about movie. And then you guys come back here, go in the comments, and leave your opinions on my opinions, which is just a recommendation. Now we're going to talk about the soundtrack. When I say this movie is fun, this is the best representation of it. Like I said, a lot of this is just people cruising around this small town. And they got the radio on from the early 60s and it's playing, you know, tunes from the early 60s and late 50s. And it's so great. Like, when I was watching the credits, because this is a time when credits weren't a million years long, so you leave, or you stick around if it's an MCU flick, of course. And as I was about to kind of, you know, turn it off, I was like, wait, the songs are already showing up. Because, if you didn't know this, in movies, songs are one of the last things to appear on the credits list, the songs that were played throughout the film. I was like, and then that was about half the credits, was just the list of songs. And I was like, all of these are bangers, and I love them. Okay, now we're getting into the visual design. And, okay, I want to say, like I said many times, this movie is a bunch of teenagers cruising around town. And it works, right? And one thing maybe I think can kind of be nitpicky is, how do all these teenagers have such nice cars? But I don't care. It's so satisfying to see these cool cars from the era, and it helps you just get intrigued with the story. Okay, now here's kind of one final thing I really noticed is because this movie takes place over a night. It starts, you know, like not long after sunset, and ends the next morning where two of the characters fly off to go to college. And so all of it is mostly dark. And that's kind of when I noticed something. When I thought, because I recently saw the original Star Wars trilogy, which, you know, Lucas did. And then this morning, after I saw it a couple days ago, like I said, I watched Raiders of the Lost Ark to see if this is a recurring thing. And it's very hard to explain, but George Lucas, when he's making a film that takes place in the brightness, where it's pretty light out, it's whatever. It doesn't look bad or anything. It doesn't look, you know, super special. But when you get to those night scenes, whether you're in space in Star Wars, a tomb of Raiders of the Lost Ark, or this entire movie, his use of shadows and color really pops. And, you know, when you think of cinematography, you usually think of the amazing, swooping shots. But I think this could be even more, you know, deserving of the best cinematography Oscar is having that creative use of light and color and shadows. And this movie represents it amazingly. So anyways, that's my very short little snippet of opinions on American Graffiti. I think I want to try doing these more where I make really fast videos about movies I feel like are under talked about. So what I want you to do is, if you haven't seen the movie yet or haven't seen it recently, go watch it and come back, and I want to know what you guys think. Challenge my opinions. It shouldn't take too long because this is a pretty short video with not too many stuff in it. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you next time. And have fun watching a classic